So thank you very much for joining my session today. My name is Krajinovic, and I will be talking about battling social media fatigue with stories that matter. Thank you for everyone writing in the chat. I will address that once my slide part of the talk is over. So first, let me tell you something about myself. I am a linguist, and on this picture, you can see me doing fieldwork in Vanuatu. It's a small island country in the Pacific. And I did linguistic fieldwork there to describe a language, an indigenous language called Nafsan. And so this was the work I did for my PhD. And I published quite a lot of academic publications and so on as a part of my work. And more recently, I actually started working not only on language and text, but also on the combination of picture and text. So for instance, things like memes, and I applied linguistic theories to memes, and more recently also to comics. This is what I do at Tilburg University currently. So this is sort of my academic background. But in my free time, I also draw comics. And I started this more or less in the pandemic. And I'm very inspired by autobiographical stories. And so I recently had a chance to publish or self-publish for the first time a small book for a comic convention. And this book consists of two stories, one of which I will be talking about today. And it's an autobiographical story about my grandma. And that's what this talk will mainly focus on, how autobiographical storytelling can lead us to stories that matter and leave us less fatigued with social media. So let's first look into what I mean by social media fatigue and what this means, or just to give you sort of my perspective of how I started experiencing it, and to see whether maybe you relate to some of these points. So for me, I started with social media again more intensely. I started publishing more and creating more content during the pandemic. And I particularly focused on the topic of ADHD because some 2 years ago, I got my ADHD diagnosis. And at the time, ADHD as a topic was trending everywhere. And I started writing a lot about it, creating short comics, especially in an amusing, funny way. And of course, most of these articles I published on Medium, and I got quite some success with some of them. I think a lot of people were relating to the stories of their ADHD, their neurodivergence. And so I found sort of home online where I could relate to other people's stories and find that I was not the only one struggling with some of these issues of concentration and paying attention. And so for me, really, this was very helpful for understanding myself. And so I continued publishing a lot of articles on Medium. I had several stories. There was a lot of discussion in the comments. So I was also consuming a lot of stories from other people. I was writing my own stories, and I felt like there was this community on social media regarding personal stories, particularly about neurodivergence. And I really love this. But then somehow, while this was happening, over, let's say, a span of 1 year, I got very fatigued with social media. And I realized that all these topics I cared about, the autobiographical stories about ADHD, about mental health, I suddenly was not connecting with people anymore. And I asked myself, why is this? Like, what changed? And whenever I thought about it, it felt like there was too much clickbaity stuff. There was too much, there was an oversaturation of content. And in one particular moment, I remember scrolling on Instagram and seeing an ad that said, use AI to treat your ADHD. And that's when I realized that my fatigue was also very fueled by this sudden AI thing coming to social media. And there was a lot of AI-generated content. There was people talking about AI. Everyone was, and now they were even making products where AI is supposed to help you run your life. And I felt we lost track of why we shared these autobiographical stories in the first place. We were sharing them to connect to each other, not to sell products. Or every time I would see someone talking about ADHD, it turns out, oh, they wanted to sell me a coaching program and things like that. And I didn't like that anymore. And so I asked myself, well, how can I find the stories that matter? When do I ever, if I do, feel the spark to create and write again? And so I realized that there was only one story that actually made me feel more invigorated, more in touch with myself. And that story was Brave Hearts. So I started working on this autobiographical comic. It was sort of a project that was slowly building, writing the comic script, and then starting to make sketches. And whenever I sat down to work on this comic, I felt very good about it. And I felt like I didn't care if I was going to get likes or not, or if I'm going to get engagement. I really cared about the story deeply for a personal reason. And this is because this is an autobiographical story about my grandma at the time. So this is a story how she came to where I lived to meet me for the first time as a newborn baby. And this was during the wartime in Croatia. And so I felt like this story meant a lot to me. And I also couldn't quite grasp why. Of course, this is a story about my grandma, so it's meaningful to me. But there is something else I would like to propose is the reason why autobiographical stories can be so important and make it feel like these are the stories that truly matter to us. And I will just present it in a sort of visual way. We have life experiences, all of us do, and many of them are negative, or we at least view some of our experiences as potentially traumatic or negative. And in this case, we're talking about a story where war was happening in Croatia. So it is an objectively negative experience as well. But then I realized that if we actually take this kind of life experience and we try to tell it to other people in form of a story structure that we typically use for fiction, we can get a more positive outlook, and we can actually see why the story matters, and we can see purpose in it, and we give it more meaning. And how do we do this? Well, my proposal today is that when we use a story structure like hero's journey, when we take an autobiographical story and mold it into the hero's journey, we suddenly find this positive reason to it, or we find the purpose of the story and the message. Ultimately, not the entire experience is positive, but the message of the story is ultimately the positive one, and that is how you can sort of reframe how we think about these potentially traumatic life experiences. And so here we can see a very small sort of simplified version of the hero's journey that I will be using today. And today I will be focusing on these particular stages of the hero's journey. And I omitted some of them, which are also relevant or they also appear in the story of Brave Hearts. But for brevity, I chose these particular stages because I think they will illustrate my point quite well, how these stages actually make us understand and reframe the thing that actually happened to us in a new light. Just to give you, so before we get into the story, I will show you for each of these stages one page from the comic that exemplifies the particular stage of hero's journey. But before we get into this, I will show you sort of where are we situated? What is the story? And what is the timeline, right? So the story of Brave Hearts happens in 1991. And this is the time when Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Kosovo are in conflict. And this is the time when Yugoslavia is falling apart and Croatia and Slovenia proclaim independence. But Serbia doesn't like that, so the war starts. And our story is taking place in Zagreb and Prijedor. And these are two cities between which there was a conflict zone at the time, a war zone. And our story happens in this very bright pink line where my grandma went on a journey to come and see the newborn me. So this is sort of the background of this story. And now we get into the hero's journey. So hero's journey is a structure that helps us sort of make a story more interesting, more entertaining, and basically in every well-written story, we will have some elements at least of the hero's journey progression. And so when I was creating this story, I was really looking into what are the elements of this story that I knew so well, that my grandma told me many times, what are the elements that make this hero's journey? And so in the very beginning, the hero gets a call to adventure. So something happens, there's a problem, and the hero needs to solve it. In the case of my grandma, she was in Prijedor in Bosnia. At this point, the war was only happening in Croatia, or it was just starting to happen. And this was for the first time that she heard on the radio, air raid sirens are happening in Zagreb. There's an air raid. And she was feeling horrified. And so she immediately called my mom and me. So we were in Zagreb, me, my mom, and my dad. And she called us and she talked to us and she realized we were okay, we were hiding, we were fine. But she felt so helpless for not being there. And so she said, you know what, as soon as I can, I'm going to Zagreb. Even though my mom tried to dissuade her, and it was a perilous journey because, as I said, there was a conflict zone between Prijedor and Zagreb, but she decided she has to come and meet her granddaughter and help her and calm her down because as a baby, of course, I was crying and couldn't deal very well with the situation, of course. So she embarks on this journey. She starts, she takes a bus. This bus is trying to avoid the more obvious conflict zone where actual conflicts are happening and goes around, as you can see on this map. But even though they're taking this safer route, Serbian soldiers still intercept the bus and demand to know why are people going to Zagreb. It's a time of conflict. You're not allowed to go from Bosnia to Croatia. And so they're threatening everyone. People in the bus are restless. And this is the challenge or part of the hero's journey where a hero gets challenged. We have enemies, in this case, the soldiers, and they are threatening the success of this journey to my grandma. But then comes the part of the hero's journey where the hero has to climb from the abyss, so climb from the very bad situation they're in and try to find a solution. And my grandma does find a solution. So in the beginning, there is silence, there's back and forth, no one is really saying anything, but my grandma gets the courage to say, I will tell you my business. I am going to see my newborn granddaughter. She needs me. And in doing this, this is the climax of this part of the story. And my grandma managed to say something, managed to find some kind of solution. The response to this, as you can see if you read the whole comic, is that the soldiers at this point do not have any good reason to do anything with the bus full of civilians, so they just let them go. And my grandma manages to get to Zagreb. She finally meets me, and this is her reward in the part of the hero's journey. There's going to still be some hiccups, and you will see in the comic in more detail. But now that she's in Zagreb, actually the air raids start again. So the situation is not completely solved, and she has to find a solution how to calm the baby me, who can't stop crying in this terrible situation. She has to find a way to make me feel safe, even though it's not safe, objectively speaking. So the way she does this is by telling me, I love you, I'm here, here's a teddy bear, I will always be here for you. And I identify this as the return with the elixir part of the hero's journey. So what this means is that my grandma, she can't really solve the air raids, she can't really solve this external problem. What she can do is give me a message or a lesson. She can make me feel safer by giving me the only thing she has, which is love and the message of love. And when I thought about this, to me, it seemed like, oh, maybe this is not the end of the story or nothing is really solved. But in a way it is, because that is also how she defeated the soldiers in the ordeal in the abyss. She told them, I need to be with my granddaughter. And they didn't have any reason to take her hostage or anyone else for that matter. People are going to see their families. They are going there for love. And I realized that ultimately her coming to see me in Zagreb, despite war going on and despite her not being able to solve it, is the ultimate message. This is the elixir that she gave me as my grandma. She taught me that we can defeat war with love. And it might seem like that's not the defeat in the physical sense, as we see in many other stories, but it is the ultimate message this hero taught me. And so for me, what was really crucial and why I showed you all these examples is that reframing this story is what made me realize what this message is. And that is the message of love that is the universal truth about humans, that love is always there to go against hate and to dismantle hate. And so I knew this story from very little. My grandma told me the story many times, but at the time, I didn't know what the actual message was until I sat down to outline the structure of the story in the way I showed you today, and thinking, what is the message? What is the elixir? What is the ultimate gift of gods, as some call it, in Hero's Journey? And it is that. And by understanding that, I also now see this story as even more impactful in my life. And I also hope that it can be impactful for others who hear it and who can relate to it, and potentially we can share this universal human experience. Once I realized this about myself and my story, I went and did some research, and I found that many other authors agree with this, and many other authors find that Hero's Journey as a structure can increase meaning in life, and it can make you understand the purpose of the things that happen to you. And so I think this is a very powerful tool for mental health. And so autobiographical storytelling, apart from being an artistic pursuit, is a very powerful way of making change and connecting with other people. And so that was the main part. And now I would like to talk to you. And I see there will be plenty of things in the chat. But my questions for you are, what stories do you find inspiring? What stories matter to you? And who are your role models? I would like to hear your stories as well. Thank you very much. I will go into questions and stop sharing my screen. Okay, let's see. Okay, a lot of greetings. Thank you, everyone. Okay, some people are talking about ADHD. So let's see. Nago Creative says, so glad to see ADHD being addressed more in Medium. I have found it a wonderful platform to share my journey and find a community with ADHD to grow. Yeah, for me as well. I agree with that. I definitely feel like Medium has been one of the better places to discuss ADHD. Because like I said, I saw a lot on Instagram and other platforms. It always somehow leads you to be sold some product, how to solve your ADHD. And that's what I dislike. I really think storytelling and writing should be about sharing experiences and be first and foremost about writing. Okay. Maybelline, I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly, says, thank you for sharing you and your grandma's story. My husband is a refugee from Croatia. PTSD, the trauma of that war, is something we continuously have to be empathetic and realize more. It's a heartbreaking experience for anybody who experiences war. Thank you. Yeah, that is so true. In my family, there is also a lot of PTSD, and it is definitely something that I feel like is not discussed enough. Even though there is awareness, there's still, even though I grew up in Croatia, there's still so much stigma around having PTSD or having mental issues. And so I feel the more we talk about it, the more we can solve it, and more we can hopefully prevent conflicts that are still ongoing and where needless traumas are being created once again. So yes, I hope we can do better in this. And one thing I didn't mention also about this story is, of course, that my grandma later came back to Bosnia, and she actually went through much worse experiences than the story I told. The story I told is just meeting these soldiers and telling them, even though it was scary, it was not as scary as the things she experienced later. So there's definitely many more stories to come about that. But yeah. So Silke Heiss says, you would surely also be very interested in Maureen Murdoch's developing of Campbell's wonderful discernments in her heroine's journey, which adds specifically typically feminine aspects of our life's journeys, especially if we're women. Wow, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I will definitely check that out. Because in my story also all my characters are female, so it's me, my mom, and my grandma, and it is a very feminine story. But what I also like about it is that it doesn't matter what gender we are, because in a way, surely war also does affect women differently, but it is again such a universal experience, and that's what I love about these kinds of stories, that they really put you in a situation where you have to act and you have to find solutions. And it's just being human at the very end. But I will check it out. Thank you so much. Cheryl Turner says, speaking our truth with powerful, meaningful stories, whether written or spoken, matters. Thank you for sharing your story here. Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. I think autobiographical stories have a particular power because we know they're true. And so still we have to mold them a little bit to fit this structure of 3 acts or hero's journey. And but still there's something so satisfying about knowing that it actually happened that way and that these people are real. They're not just invented. And yeah, that these characters are like real people. I think I love that too. Oh, someone said, Jasmine and Herman said, this is the best session today. Oh, thank you so much. That's great to hear. Thank you. And thank you for everyone leaving nice comments. I'm not reading everything for the purposes of time, but thank you for all the love. Silke also said, we can defeat war with love. Really, this is a story that matters. Thank you. Yeah, I really believe it is. And I think I also like made a short comic about Gaza. And I really think love is, and us as individuals who can't do directly anything to stop wars, right? Right now, what can I do? The only thing I can do is share a message like this, because ultimately, if other people see it, if other people find love in their hearts instead of hatred, then that is the only thing we can do, I think. Or not the only thing, but one of the more fundamental things we should all do as humans. So I definitely believe that this is more important than ever to share this message. Okay, Greg Dunn said, I described myself as follows: socially progressive liberal who's a fiscal conservative, blue-collar, tough love, college-educated, former male cop, former city planner. So biographically, I'm a little bit of everything to everyone. I question whether this is good or bad, and how might I use this to counter social media fatigue, polarization, alienation with whom I interact in person and virtually. I mean, I think especially having so many different adjectives and many different nouns of who you are, I think you would have great stories to tell. I can already see a movie happening here. Blue collar, tough love, cop. This sounds very interesting. So everyone has a story. That's also the case. And you have to find what parts of your life story matter to you. What were the life lessons or the things you learned from those experiences, and then you take those that mean the most to you, and you turn them into something, into a story. In this case, I focused on my role model, my grandma, because I felt like it's not so common to meet people like that anymore, who love others unconditionally and who don't ask for anything in return. And so I felt like this role model meant so much to me that I wanted to share that story first, because I felt like my other experiences were not as grand or didn't mean as much to me as this one particular, or these particular stories that I'm developing about her mean. But also, depending on your time in your life, different things might be more important to you. So whatever speaks to you, just follow that, and you'll find great stories there, I believe. Tony Greathouse says, Maya Angelou's story empowers me, as do most African American women who've succeeded against great odds. Yes, yeah, that's the best. When we see ourselves in other people, when we come from similar backgrounds, and especially like someone else said, who was it? Ali Hal said, I love stories of underdogs succeeding. And that's also what I love about my grandma's stories, is that she was always an underdog, being a woman in her time, being also in an abusive marriage, experiencing all kinds of traumas, really. And then 2 wars, World War II, then this war. You know, you don't know what's worse. And still, she always came out victorious. Some parts are luck, surviving is one part luck, but being able to live with such dignity and being able to be so humble and still stand up for yourself, those are the things we can learn from our grandparents, I think. It's harder to see that in more modern events, I believe. Jasmine Herman says, reading stories from women with, what is this? B VII saved my life. I'm not sure what that is, but maybe you can write it down somewhere else. Janefa Jahan says, I've just published a poetry memoir about my mother's life navigating domestic violence up to her death. Your findings about meaning are reassuring. Thank you. Yes, I believe ultimately these are a lot of female stories are about, like I said, standing up for yourself, but also, yeah, maintaining your dignity through this love, even when you are the underdog. Lisa Yoder asked, do you live in the Netherlands? Yes, I do. Moimona B says, I joined late, so only heard the last part where your grand goes into war zone to meet you. Yes, thanks. Thank you for the compliment to John Nielsen. Jaime or Jaime, I'm not sure. Haley, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit tired, so if I'm mispronouncing things, I apologize. I like the idea of using creative strategies to give more life to articles and make them stand apart from the CEO article sausage factory that seems to be everywhere. Yes, definitely. I feel like being creative is very important when we write. And sometimes we just can't influence, we can't know exactly what will be viral or what will succeed ultimately. But I prefer always going a bit more creative and writing about what I'm interested at in the moment, rather than going for some trendy topic. And for me, ADHD was somehow, it was a coincidental set of circumstances that I got diagnosed at the time when the topic started trending. And then I was like caught into this like kind of trendy time of ADHD on social media. But then after some time, it lost the impetus. It wasn't as exciting or creative anymore once everyone was doing it. So that's kind of the issue with these trends that come and go. Annelise Brunner, in my 30s, I discovered that my grandmother was a Tulsa race massacre survivor. It helped me make sense of her alcohol addiction. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of the times, most mental health conditions have something to do with some kind of trauma, but in particular, PTSD and potentially addictions are often come from more difficult conflict situations. And yes, it's just, I think raising awareness will probably help us understand better these kinds of situations because they're so extreme and people who have not experienced it might not understand how hard it is to make a sense of reality after you've seen such horrible things happen. So it just makes me admire people like my grandma who managed to still sort of cope with it in this way with love. It makes me admire them even more for not for simply seeing the positive thing in people even after the fact, and of course judging the bad ones, but drawing the line and saying, okay, I still love people, but I judge those who did crimes against humanity. Larry Jeffy says, how much do you think is your writing ability helped with your immense drawing talent to bring out the story? Thank you. Well, I'm still sort of a beginner, or my drawing is not yet at the level of maybe professional drawing. I'm still learning, but I believe my strength is a little bit more in writing, in the sense that I'm not sure how to explain it. I think I always had a knack for finding the sort of the climax of the story. If I think about some event or something, I can easily point out, okay, this is the most important part. I think this is the message of the story. And also, since I've been doing academic writing, I usually don't have a big problem expressing myself in English. But of course, yeah, I do prefer the combination with visuals. So I do prefer simpler writing and giving also big having the visuals there to give a big impact. But yeah, my drawing is still developing. But I believe they both go together. I try to make it the way I would love to have read it from someone else. So thanks for the comment. Okay, we still have 1 minute maybe. So Michelle Marcel says, thanks for sharing your story. I watched this movie recently, Critical Thinking. I enjoy the ideas of tapping into children's strengths and offering opportunities. Thanks. Yeah, I'll check that out. Chris Clark says, do you think the hero's journey format can be applied successfully to semi-autobiographies or literally fictional stories? Yes, I believe so. I believe it's a very universal format, and even when you're not directly trying to have your story fit that format, you end up somehow doing it because having the 3-act structure at least will lead to this type of story, I believe. And I think we're now out of time. It's 7 already. Thank you so much. I will try to copy all the questions that I haven't answered, and I will write a Medium post potentially with some of the leftover questions. Thank you everyone for joining this session. I loved talking to you. This was so much fun. And I will see you in other sessions and we can continue this discussion potentially in my post. Thank you so much.